Right. So this is part 4 of a little series of, whoops, I went small again, I wanted to have it bigger, of a series based on a talk I gave now quite a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Okay, and I've covered a lot of material, and this time I want to move on to some further subjects. And where do I want to be? I had talked about the spreadsheet and how it was compiled, and I've been talking about spreadsheets then and now. So I'm talking about differences between the cases of Lucia de Berk and Lucy Letby, and an enormous difference is, of course, the two different jurisdictions. The Lucy Letby case is investigated and tried in the United Kingdom in an adversarial system with a jury. So the fact finders are jury, 12 ordinary folk, your 12 ordinary people from the public, chosen at random, are the ones who actually decide whether the accusations brought to you by the state, by the Crown Prosecution Service, are true or not. And of course it involves, the trial involves a kind of battle for the approval of the public. I mean, a battle between the two barristers of the two sides, the prosecuting barrister and the defense barrister, who take it in turns to question people on the stand and generally do their best to discredit the other side, both the arguments and the characters of the people bringing the arguments. So it's a show, and it's a show which is full of drama, theatre, and it makes great newspaper reporting, and of course later it makes great cinema and TV. The Netherlands situation is a so-called inquisitorial prosecution system, legal system, criminal prosecution system, which means it's an inquiry, much like the Third World Inquiry. There's a board of wise judges at a higher level, typically 3 judges, one taking the lead and 2 on at their side, and they are the people whose task is to find the facts and to determine the truth, to determine the legal facts, and to determine the facts of the whether or not the prosecution allegations are true or not. And naturally, if they convict somebody, then prison sentences, etc., will follow, and they have some latitude in whether they give the worst or the most mild prison sentence. But given the crimes, once the crimes have been found to be true, some of the crimes have been found to be true, then they determine the punishment. And okay. There are more differences, and I'm not quite sure in how far these are sort of 100%, but it has struck people on the continent and around the world, including in America and in Australia and Canada, in Anglo-Saxonia, that it is pretty amazing that there's not a more or less automatic right to appeal in a UK criminal case. You have to make an application to appeal. And in the first case, the application goes to the same judge who tried you initially. So they are, and it has to have grounds, and the grounds have to be strong legal grounds, and typically they have to be grounds of new evidence. And the definition of new evidence is a definition which criminal court judges in the UK have made over the years, appeal court judges especially, because another difference is that the UK has case law. So law is actually, the law consists of not just laws passed in Parliament, which is sovereign, the people are sovereign, and the people's representatives they make the laws, interplay between government and Parliament, and two houses of Parliament, so there's a supervisory body higher up, inhabited by judges, judges and bishops, okay, and people who have previously contributed to the past governments, to parties. Right, so it's a strange system in the UK, but it has case law, and the law is basically written by judges. It's written by legal professionals with some help of the clerics. I mean, it's a bit like Iran. The country is run by a certain part of the elite, and okay. But anyway, as I was saying, people are amazed that you can't more or less automatically have an right to appeal. You have to come up with excuses, grounds, and they are evaluated by, at first instance, the same judge who's already passed judgment, who's obviously not going to be happy that the thing was not done properly the first time. That's a shame. And then if you try again, you will have 3 judges, and even if you show in appeal application hearings that one of the main scientific pillars of the prosecution case is bullshit, the air embolism, Shuli. Okay, but this was science which was already known, and in fact already known. I mean, published science was published and known by the world at the time of the first trial, and the defense didn't use it, so you can't use it now. This shocks people around the world. Of course, it is a clever legal excuse to stop discussion. Okay, what also is very visible from the outside is the extraordinarily unbalanced application of contempt of court rules in the United Kingdom, which mean that while a trial is being prepared, not only while it is going on, but while a trial is in the offing, people are not allowed to discuss the merits of the case in public. And this is applied to make sure that nothing supporting the defense is published, whether by newspapers or or on internet, in social media. On the other hand, people who like to fantasize about serial killers and have all kinds of ideas about the strength of the prosecution case can say just what they like, and especially the true crime fanatics who have been convinced for a long time that this is a serial killer nurse, an incredibly shocking and huge case, and she's guilty. Nobody stopped them from talking all the time, and nobody, the newspapers, of course, published what they heard in court, as they're supposed to. But what the prosecution said was the juicy stuff, the exciting stuff. And in past cases, we know that court journalists don't even wait to hear the defense arguments. As soon as they have heard the prosecution, some prosecution arguments, they rush out to, telephone or fax or whatever, their report of what was just said to their newspaper editors, so as to be the first to cover the prosecution case. It's what happens. And the prosecution case is lurid and it's created obviously to convince jurors. But what convinced jurors will also convince court journalists. And what convinced court journalists and jurors will make fantastic copy in the newspapers. So that happens in a huge scale, and one can understand why. Now, in the Netherlands, in the Lucy de Berk case, you could say similar things, but they're not as extreme as in the UK. And of course, many years have gone by, and social media is much more influential and big and totally unregulated, unpoliced. Well, it's only policed when you say things which hurt a rich person's earning capacity. Then the rich person's lawyers will go after you. But otherwise, you can say what you like, say most ghastly things. So, okay, that's the contempt of court and case law. What else is here? As we saw in the Lucy Letby case, the judge has enormous powers about whether or not expert testimony is allowed. Judge Goss said that the jurors could determine whether or not Dowie Evans is a reliable scientific expert, despite having been warned and despite the defense having pointed this out to him. The judge denied the request of the defense to bring in the RCPCH report as evidence, because it wasn't about the general state of affairs on that unit, it was about the individual cases. So this was a point of view of Judge Goss. He thought, his opinion was that the jury had to look at those 25 accusations, 25 indictments or 24, whatever, it keeps changing a little bit, on the spreadsheet, those lists of criminal, allegations of criminal bad doing by Lucy. That was what they were going to look at, and that was all. And arguments about the lack of all the things that were wrong in the unit were, in his view, irrelevant or unimportant, or and could not be brought as evidence to the jury. Moreover, he ruled that the prosecution had to go through each of the 25 indictments in turn, bringing in all their scientific experts for each of those 25, and only then was the defense allowed to bring in their experts, their counter experts. Well, they didn't have many, but they had one expert who waited in the wings during the whole trial, was never called. And I would say it's obvious he should have been allowed to give his medical opinion about each of those 25 events, in turn interleaved with the prosecution expert's opinion about them. But this was not allowed. I think this is a gross, absolutely gross bias on Judge Goss's part. It obviously made the trial shorter and faster. And was he convinced in advance that Lucy Letby was guilty? Who knows? But he ran the trial his way, and it was a way which was grossly unfair. Goss permitted non-unanimous verdicts. he told the jurors at the second trial that if they believed what had happened in the first trial, then they could use that, and they didn't need to have any idea how Lucy harmed the baby in the retrial of baby K, I think, which was necessary because the jurors had not been able to come to an opinion in the first trial. Well, a new set of jurors who heard that who'd heard what the previous trial had concluded didn't need. They had a lunch break, and then they only needed an hour and a half or something to have their unanimous verdict that she'd killed baby K, or was it only harmed baby K, attacked baby K? I can't remember. It's kind of irrelevant because it's just one more to the list, and there's enough to keep her in jail for life. The retrial for baby K had a useful purpose for the prosecution of keeping contempt of court in operation for another year, right? Because a trial was, and the defense was allowed. Sorry, the prosecution was allowed to appeal for that case where the jury had not come to a verdict, but the defense was not allowed. Okay, so I think it's very clear to me that UK criminal prosecution has utterly failed in this case, and of course Goss had a big part in that, and no doubt his motives were pure, and his legal expertise is great, and sorry, I don't like him at all, but okay. Right, so now I want to talk about something which may take more than 12 minutes. I want to talk about why I believe that Lucy Letby is innocent, but at the same time I want to teach you something about Bayes' theorem, about Bayesian probability calculations, where probability is interpreted as a way to measure degrees of belief. Why I believe Lucy Letby is innocent? Well, of course, I believe that because I have studied the case in quite a lot of depth and studied what many people have said about it. And I was not in the court. I haven't studied all of the court transcripts, and I haven't studied all of the medical notes, obviously, but I have followed the trial, and I have an opinion, and I'm able to give a sort of mathematical foundation to my opinion, and I use Bayesian probability reasoning, which is all about how you should update your beliefs about something which is uncertain, a question, an important question you don't know the answer to. The question is put to you, okay, you don't know the answer, but you have some prior beliefs as to what the answer could be. You have a prior weight of you start off being more or less sure what the answers might be based on what you know about the world. And then you are given some further information. And as you get further information, a wise person updates their beliefs. And this can be done consecutively, and there is a mathematical way to describe how this ought to be done. There's a mathematical theorem that if you don't do it in this way, then your reasoning is inconsistent, and you could be caught out. You could be forced to. So the Bayesian subjective understanding of probability is that when you say something is 10 to 1, 10 to 1 likely to happen versus the one 10 times more likely to happen than it doesn't happen. That's what 10 to 1 means. You mean that you would be prepared to bet on those odds, right? If you're 10 to 1 certain something is going to happen, you're willing to put in a €1 and you'll get 10 if the bet comes out. I'm not good at money, so I'm not quite sure if I'm saying this the right way. I guess it's the other way around. If you think something is 10 to 1 certain, then you will bet €10 that it will happen, which means you'll lose €10 if it doesn't, to somebody who only puts in €1. So you'll only win €1 if it does happen. You would have started with 10 and you'll end up with 11. Sorry, that's what it means. Now, prior odds can be based on sort of real statistics. I mean, in the sense of how often things have happened in the past. So we have to fix a starting point and we have to fix the questions. And I start. Different people may start in different ways. Everybody can start just how they like. I mean, the final question is Lucy Letby innocent or guilty, you could say. Or is she guilty of the charges which she's convicted of? Is she innocent? Is she innocent of all the charges which were put against her? I think she's innocent of all the charges put against her. All those 25 anyway. I mean, I'm not sure if she was also charged with other things as well, like stealing stuff from the hospital or falsifying forms and so on. Those may also be crimes which she's also convicted of by now. I have no idea. But I'm talking about those 25 charges. I believe she's innocent of all of them. But I start at the following point. I choose to start at the point where we hear that there has been a big spike in deaths in the neonatal units in the UK. And I don't know much more except that a police investigation is starting, and the police investigation is focusing on the possibility, which would be criminal, that spike in deaths at a neonatal unit is caused by a killer nurse, right? So if eventually it turns out to be indeed caused by a killer nurse, then that could be Lucy, and so on and so forth. But I start with that level of sort of coarseness of description. Spike in deaths at a neonatal unit. Is there a killer nurse? Has a killer nurse been at work? Now, if you look at the newspapers, you'll see that there is a catastrophic spike in deaths at the UK neonatal unit basically every year, and moreover caused by typical NHS failings, staffing, infections, crazy new policies, so on and so forth. I mean, that's just easy to say, I think, and you can't be denied. This happens every year. And by the way, of course, in the Lucy Letby case, it has been sort of confirmed by Sir David Spiegelhalter, Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter at the Thirlwell inquiry. He said, yes, there was a spike at Countess of Chester, and it was maybe like a once in so many years for Countess of Chester, but it's like every year for the for the NHS. That's exactly what he said on the basis of publicly available statistics. What about serial killer nurses? Now, what about, not about serial killer nurses, but serial killer nurses on a neonatal unit? Now, actually, I don't know any such case in the last 50 years, say, in the UK. You may talk about Bev Allitt. That was about deaths and collapses and the like on a pediatric ward. There were children, young children, not recently born babies. Okay, I mean, and how many years ago was that? Okay, but in my opinion, has not been 1 in 50 years, but let's say 1 in 50 years. So this means that before we learn any more particularities of the case in question, I would bet 50 to 1 that what is going on there is just another NHS catastrophe and not a killer nurse. That's what I would bet to start off with. Now I see I'm not going to do this next 2 slides in 5 minutes, so I'm going to give myself some more time, which I do by saying, let me do restart. Well, honestly, I'm not going to go on for 30 minutes. Can I change it to something else? Oh, I cancel. Let's choose 10 minutes. See if I can do it in 10 minutes. I can't promise anything. We'll see. Now, okay, we've heard, we now know an awful lot, of course. We've heard an awful lot. There was an awful lot said during the trial. There's been an awful lot said by the police. There's an awful lot said in the newspapers. A whole lot has happened since the convictions. We've had the Shu Lee business. We've had the 14 neonatologists. And like every day, there's more stuff. We've had Thirlwell. Okay, Thirlwell is not finished, but all the way through the Thirlwell investigation, we've been having more stuff. And I can't, in a couple of slides, I think there's going to be 1 or 2. Let me just look ahead. The next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to do 2 more slides after this one. And then I'm going to quit for today. So, as I said, as I said, I start off with 50 to 1. 50 to 1 for no killer nurse. Now, the first piece of evidence I wanted to bring into the game is not a single piece of evidence, but it's a kind of summary of a lot of evidence, and it's basically a lot of evidence which became available. One could say certainly it was available when the first long trial was finished, and it became available during the court proceedings, which is there is no direct medical or eyewitness evidence that any baby was deliberately harmed by anyone. And this despite 5 years of intensive police investigations and lots of experts and so on and so forth. Now, what I have to do now is to say how likely would that have been. I mean, that is what happened. How likely was that under the guilty assumption, and how likely was it under the not guilty assumption? And by the way, I'm saying guilty and not guilty, but really I'm talking about the hypothesis I started with. No killer nurse, just a usual NHS debacle, disaster, catastrophe, versus killer nurse. But okay, I write G or not G. I would say that if there had been a killer nurse actually active, that there would have been a 1 in 20 chance at least of the police investigation of coming up with something pretty hard, pretty direct. Conversely, if in fact it was just the usual NHS debacle, I would have thought that there would be a pretty big chance that the police indeed wouldn't have found direct evidence in 5 years of activities of a killer nurse. And I put both of those chances as 1 in 20. 1 in 20, or 1 to 19. But the thing is, the ratio of the two probabilities, probability of the evidence being no evidence, right? No direct evidence, is the two probabilities under the two hypotheses we're working with are 1 in 20 versus 19 in 20, and the ratio is 19 to 1, which is about 20 to 1. If I did the maths right. And therefore, I have now got what is called a likelihood ratio of 20 to 1. The evidence is 20 times more likely under innocence than under guilt. We started with 50 times more likely innocent than guilt. So now we multiply the 20 by the 50 and the 1 by the 1, and we get 1,000 to 1. So now it's 1,000 to 1 at this stage that, in particular, Lucy Letby is innocent, but that there's no serial killer there at all. Okay, but we haven't done yet. Let's bring in the character evidence. Most of the trial was busy with the character evidence. Now, by the way, of course, some people will say, well, but the insulin evidence proves murder, but it doesn't prove murder. There were two strange insulin assays, and they don't prove that Lucy Letby did anything on their own. Indeed, according to current understanding, they don't prove anything much at all. But so that's why I'm not talking about the insulin here. I will come back to it, I'm sure. I should do. I mean, we know more about the insulin assays are evidence, and I haven't brought them in yet. Okay, 1,000 to 1. What about evidence that Lucy Letby is basically an unhinged, very, very clever, evil killer in her personality, in evidence in her behavior in court, of course, and evidence in her what we know about her history and upbringing and life. Lucy is universally known to be kind, conscientious, helpful, social, truthful, serious at work, great fun in the evenings. I'm taking E to be this evidence to be, again, no evidence in the sense of no evidence of a psychopath. Of course, if she actually killed those babies, she was a psychopath, but we don't know that yet. We are where we are. We are where we are. We are at 1,000 to 1. There was no killer nurse around. Okay. Let me just guess again. I mean, I know these are guesses, and maybe psychologists. I would like psychologists and forensic psychologists and criminologists to discuss this, to tell me what, according to their expertise, is the weight of evidence up to and during the trial, but not taking account of convictions, not taking account of anything but psychological evidence, behavioral evidence. Okay. They're the ones who should do this, not me, obviously. But these are my guesses that this is strong evidence for innocence. I'm running out of time again, so I'm going to cancel. I'm going to give myself just 10 minutes yet again. Sorry. Okay, the clock's running again. There it goes. Anyway, so I've put in here another likelihood ratio of 20. The no evidence of a psychopath, no sort of direct psychological evidence of a psychopath when we have not taken account of the things I haven't taken account of yet. 20 to 1, I was at 1,000 to 1, so now I'm at 20,000 to 1, because it's pretty easy calculations. Okay, let's continue. What else do we have? Oh, I hit the wrong button. This was the one. Okay, I was at 20,000. Now let's look at some statistical data. There was a huge number of deaths in 2015 and 2016. It seems to me that it is very well explained by the acuity of the babies being admitted in that period. And just to illustrate that, there were 10 deaths in a half-year sub-period, I think. Maybe a couple of them were outside the unit, babies who were transferred, and maybe it was 8, whatever. But in about half a year, there were a large number of deaths which are absolutely clearly natural. Yet the court was told that normal was 3 a year and all explainable, basically. But in half a year, there were at least half a dozen completely normal. That's one a month. 3 a year is one every 4 months. So it is clear that the natural death rate in that hospital in the period of interest was at least 4 times what it was before and what it became later. We also know why this happened. It was due to NHS policy in that network of hospitals and more wide-ranging closure of maternity units in North Wales, a flood of serious cases going to Liverpool hospitals which didn't have the capacity, and so babies and mothers whose babies could be expected to need level 3 care couldn't be admitted in Liverpool and were parked in Chester. And so the spike in deaths, much of the spike in deaths, the fact there was a spike at all, is explainable by hospital admission policy and capacity problems in the local hospital network. And by the way, the consultant paediatricians must have known this and understood this. And this makes, in my opinion, Breary and Jairam and the others, the gang of 7, as Dr. Gibbs likes to call them himself, boastfully, proudly. There was a gang of 7. They all thought Lucy was killing babies. He did too. They should have known that what was the major cause of the spike. The jury was not told, the police were not told, the public was not told. We have only slowly come to know this through Thirlwall, bless her heart, poor woman. Gosh didn't know, nobody told Gosh, poor guy. Everybody was fooled, the police were fooled, the legal establishment was fooled, the public was fooled. So I personally think that if a serial killer had been active who had actually, for instance, killed 7 babies, then the number of deaths would have been clearly greater than the number one would have expected given acuity and volume of patients. And there are a lot of things we don't know. But I would give this another likelihood ratio of 10. I would give another factor, maybe a 5, for the lying of Beery and Jairam. And I don't mean the fact that they are lying, but the evidence that they are lying. The evidence which we now have that they lied, and that indeed that they were personally responsible for some of the harm, including likely death of some of the babies. We don't know this for sure, but there is strong evidence for this now. That they are the ones who went to the police in panic, actually not only when the RCPCH report came out, but it seems to me their panic was most when Lucy was was coming back to the ward, because they knew that with her flair for filling in datex forms, they were going to be likely in for more trouble. They could be reported to the General Medical Council, is it called GMC, for bullying. That's the next thing that could happen. They weren't only scared because of what the RCPH report said. There was a whole lot more waiting to happen. The whole can of worms was going to get open, and Lucy had her voice back. So, okay, so what have I said here? We were at 20,000 to 1. I would like to bring in another 2 base factors of 10 and 5, which is 20. I think I'm making some mathematical errors here. I need 50. 50 is 5 and 10 to go from 20,000 up to 1 million. I'm at least 1 million to 1 sure that Lucy Letby is innocent now. Right? I'm 1 million to 1 sure that this was just another NHS disaster and not a serial killer. That's where I started, right? I mean, those were the hypotheses. And of course, if indeed it was an NHS debacle and no serial killer, then of course Lucy Letby is innocent of all the allegations made against her. Of course, she might have accidentally harmed some babies, but I would blame. I think the blame belongs elsewhere. Okay, so I think that's where I want to stop this. The next slide, the next remaining part of the talk is going to be about the media, some concluding remarks, and I will get back to the insulin again and talk about forensic science in the UK, and I will talk about the future, so what is going to happen next, okay, and who knows what is going to happen next. So there may be one more part, and there may be 2 more parts. I mean, there are also some concluding remarks to be made. Maybe I should make the concluding remarks at the end and not show them to you now. Okay, but this is where I will continue next time, and I will leave you here with my personal current betting odds of at least 1 million to 1 that Lucy is innocent, and my motivation for that through very rough and ready Bayesian calculations involving multiplying sort of very round, ballpark figures, but all pointing the same way. That's maybe the most important point. And everybody is welcome to do their own calculations using their own guesses for all those numbers, which I have honestly just guessed. And they can try doing it starting from a different starting point. I said what my starting point was. I chose it because of convenience, because I could support the numbers I put there, and because I could continue from that starting point, narrowing the focus all the way as I brought in more evidence. Evidence came in, the focus narrowed, and we got from and we ended where we ended. Please tell me how you would like to do this, and just go ahead and do it and let me know what you end up with. And especially if you believe Lucy Letby is guilty, please do it. Show us how you are now so certain still that Lucy is guilty. Okay, this is where the talk is going to stop, which means I have to press